Hi, I'm Justin Moorman.
And I'm Katie Thornton, and this is the Re-Education of Schools podcast,
where we have open, honest conversations about how to better understand social-emotional learning, trauma-informed care, the whys behind student behavior, and how to help kids navigate it all as they go through school and life. All right, welcome back to our next episode. This is Us, our origin story. Starting off strong today. If you have not yet written a review or given us a 5-star rating, we would love for you to do that. If you've been enjoying this and you have shared it, you want to share it, you want to get the word out there to more people, this is a great way for us to do that. We would love it, and we really appreciate it. And shameless plug for reaching out to us, too. We love it when you guys do that, and always love hearing from you. Katie is here, despite the fact that she hasn't said anything yet.
Hey.
I was just doing my little intro.
Yeah.
So this episode is going to be a little bit different, Katie. It's episode title, again, This Is Us, Our Origin Story. We just recently had a podcast that we were on with Guy Stevens, right?
Yep.
And he had kind of asked us this question, and afterwards we thought, it's kind of interesting. Besides kind of a random snippets, we hadn't really talked about how we got here very much. Like on our podcast,
Yeah.
we kind of jumped straight into trainings and stuff like that. Stuff has come up, but we haven't really gone in depth at all into all that much of what we do or how we ended up here. And so we kind of thought that people may be interested. We get asked a lot. And so this is the time for us to do that.
Yeah.
Whole episode on it.
Yeah.
So if you don't care about us personally, then maybe no, this is still a good one. It's still a good one to listen to.
Yeah. And I would say we were talking with Colin Seal, and he said a lot of his beginning work that he encourages staff to do is really look at their origin story of why they're actually here. So here we go. So I'm going to start, if that's okay.
Yeah, jump in. Go for it.
So I'm going to have Justin share with our listeners how you ended up here.
Oh, I thought you were saying like you were going to start by
No, I'm going to have
story.
you start. I'm going to interview first.
Oh, now I've got to re-engage with my story. Okay.
Okay.
So for me, I started off, I didn't plan on being in education at all. That was not like my plan overall. I didn't go to college for this at first. I went and got my undergrad in something else. And as I was getting ready to finish college, I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I'm going to have a degree, but I don't really know what I want to do. And got out, got some like odd jobs right away, and didn't take long. Ended up getting engaged. Me and Melissa were going to get married, and which is what engagement means. For those of you out there that don't know what engagement means, that's what it means.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get a job. I was trying to find something that was going to be sustainable, right? Not like a random odd job for a college kid is what I was looking for. And I couldn't get anything. Everybody continually, and I'm sure there are all kinds of people out there who've had this experience. Either they said I had too much education, so they didn't think I would stay, or they said that I didn't have enough experience, so I needed to go get experience, and then they would give me a job. And I'm like, well, somebody's got to start by giving me experience. You know, who's going to do that first? So I'm always super aware of that when I hear people that haven't had experience yet, because I'm like, I don't know. I was that guy. So I looked around forever, and there's a much longer story to all of this. But bottom line, I couldn't get a job for months and months and months. Like at all, and which was crazy. And then I started thinking, like, something wrong with me? Like, why can't I get a job? But ended up getting a job, a part-time custodian job, for this like office building. I knew that they were affiliated with a school, but I didn't know how. Just because where I had found the job, I knew it was affiliated with a school. And so went in and interviewed with these. It was with a superintendent and assistant superintendent for a part-time custodian job, which I thought was an interesting. Like, why would those two people be interviewing for this position? But it was something that they were just starting. They had been contracting it out, and so they were trying to figure out, what kind of person do we want? And that guy, what the superintendent asked me then, he's like, well, why are you here? He's like, because we're looking at your stuff. We're listening to you. You sound okay. Like, you're somewhat well-spoken. You seem like a pretty sharp person. You got this college degree. Why are you applying for this? And so kind of gave him that whole explanation. Like, I need something. I need a job. And I'm getting married. At this point, I was getting married Saturday. It was like a Tuesday, and I was getting married Saturday. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to. We don't have money. Like, I've got to get a job. Yeah. And so they ended up calling me back before I even got home and said, well, we'll give you a job. Even though I was like, I'm not going to stay here. I'm out as soon as I can get a better job than this. I'm going to be out. And so I was pretty convinced they wouldn't give it to me, but they did. I did only stay for about 2 months, and then got another offer to go be help with a painting company for like the summer. It was going to be a seasonal job. But on my way out, as I was leaving, the assistant superintendent said, "We'd love for you to talk to HR and potentially work as an aide, as a classroom aide, in one of our schools." And all I knew is that their schools were working with special education, so I had a real specific thought of what special education was. And I said, "Sure, I'll do that because I don't have any plan for."
And this is a separate facility, a county
Yeah, well,
based ESC.
I end up finding out that that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so I go in and I interview, and as I interview, because it was towards the end of the school year, and so as I was interviewing, the principal at the time walked me around, and she was like, "Let's take a look." At first, she was like, "The position that you're saying you want, we actually only give to people with experience," and I was like, "You got to be freaking kidding me! Like,
Yeah.
how are you? How is this the reality again?" And I was like, "Well, this is the one I want." And she said, "Well, let's walk you around and show you some stuff." And as we walked through the building, we went into classroom after classroom, and like in a very honest way, as a young guy in his 20s, never worked in a school, we kept going into rooms, and I kept thinking, all these kids look typical. Like, I don't understand. Like, I didn't understand it because I was like, I thought this was all special education, and so I was like, but you can't act like you don't know what's happening. So you go. So I eventually, the assistant superintendent who I'd worked closely with at that office building, the principal ultimately didn't want to give me the job because rightfully somebody in that position was going to need experience, and he told her, just give me whatever job I wanted. And so she did. She gave me the job. And that next year I went in. It was a separate facility. Like you said, I was working mostly with students with like an emotional disturbance label.
Yeah.
And again, so what we would do is we took students from all over the county and contracted with districts, and the districts would pay us to kind of gather all these students, and then we would have just a school of just students who had really extreme disabilities, whether it was like kind of multiple disabilities or whether it was emotional disabilities. That's what we did. And so I learned on the fly and had a lot of really great people. Luckily, like not luckily for the organization, but they had just laid a bunch of people off a few years back, and so everybody there was like the next youngest guy was like 12 years older than me, and then the next youngest person after that was like 10 years older than him. Right? So like everybody had been around forever, but everybody had all this experience. I could have been most of their kid, and they were great about taking me under their wing and kind of showing me stuff, helping me learn things like that. Fast forward, I end up getting my teaching license because I'm like, this is something that, is interesting to me. I think what happened, I was there, I didn't know that this population of people existed who were, I hate to say being kicked out of schools, but they were being sent away from their typical school to go somewhere else where they weren't with any of their typical peers, and they'd kind of been forgotten. It would be years later that when I was teaching, that a person that had been higher up in another district in our area made this comment that's always stuck with me. And I'm sure he was a great guy ultimately, but he ultimately said, we were talking about the students that came to us and how the districts loved this other guy was saying how this districts loved hearing that they were doing well. And this guy said, he laughed and he said, "Let me tell you about those districts." He's like, "They don't care that they're doing well. All they know is that they had a problem, and that now the problem's gone, and then the problem is somebody else's problem.
And they're happy to pay a lot of money to make that happen."
And I remember sitting there thinking like, well, they're not a problem. They're a kid. Like, I have that kid in class. I've got a class full of those quote unquote problems right now. Like a subs in, like, cause I'm here doing this other thing. And I remember thinking, like that the kids that we work with deserved to have people that didn't see them as a problem. They deserved to have people that saw them as people and that they just needed help. And it didn't mean that we were magical and fixed all the wrongs in their life or anything like that. But so I worked there for years ultimately. And just learned a lot from a lot of people that knew a lot more than I did, and learned a lot from a lot of experience, and had a lot of freedom ultimately to by the principal that initially hired me, and a bunch of other principals ultimately too, to kind of try things that I thought might work and to adjust things that I saw worked for other people. and kind of made them my own in different ways. Failed a ton, did a ton of stuff that I was like, well, that was wrong. Ooh, that didn't get, like, I didn't get what the result. I didn't think they'd react that way if I said that or if I did that. But had a lot of freedom to do those things and to learn a lot, and then to be corrected in a very nice way by a lot of people as well. So I did that for several years, and then had a couple years where we just had taken on another district that was pretty big that had been doing their own thing for a while, and then they stopped doing their own thing, and so they were going to contract back with us again. And it was a huge influx of kids who had never been in our program, and the district hadn't necessarily been doing their program well.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, all at once, we get all these kids in who, are saying things like, well, we just watched The Price is Right all day, or we didn't have to do any work, or they would look at us and very genuinely, not like in an angry way, they'd be like, we have to go to another class. We have to do it again. And you're like, it's like 8:40 in the morning. Like, what'd you think was going to happen? But they just didn't know this other place. It wasn't great, obviously. And what I found, because our room was running relatively okay. And what I found about halfway through the year, I talked to another teacher that was teaching a much younger class, and I tend to joke around a lot. I tend to try to lighten the mood a lot if people are having a tough time, right? And so I made this comment about something that I knew had happened during a class, and she teared up and started to kind of cry, and she started telling me how hard of a year it was. And something just kind of switched in me to be like, because I'd always been like, I'm going to kind of be on my own. I just take care of my business, clock in, do what I do as well as I can do it, and then I get out of here. And I remember going home to my wife, to Melissa, and being like, I think people need help, and I think I can help. And we started talking about it, and I started asking around more at that place, and a lot of people were just in a bad way that year. And it was actually Melissa. As Katie, so often happens. It's usually Melissa. Usually something
Melissa's
good comes
the
up,
secret
and
ghostwriter
then
of the
Melissa's like,
podcast, for
"Well,
sure.
actually, why don't you do this?" And she made a comment about this job. My first year of teaching, there was a lead teacher at a place I worked, and she said, "Well, what about like what he did?" I'd never considered that because the place I worked didn't have that. So I just never considered it. And so talked to some people in charge that ultimately got a couple years where what we call it, I was the dean of students for a couple of years there is what they ended up titling it. And I got to work alongside teachers much more. So I didn't have assigned students in my classroom, and loved it. Loved being able to like bring some of the newer, younger teachers along and kind of be there to support them. Got to learn a lot from a lot of teachers that were veterans that had been around for a while. And really got more of a heart for like trying to help out the adults in all of that, and saw like how much hopefully I was able to do to support them and to kind of be alongside them in kind of the toughest moments. Some stuff shifted around just with the structure of that organization, and so I went back into a classroom and felt like I was even better then. Fast forward a few more years after that, somebody who used to work for that organization had left, gone to the district that Katie's in currently, and he had called me up looking for something that he had, and that he said, actually, I'm getting ready to move out of state, so there'll be an opening. Would you consider coming here? And I was like, I don't know, maybe, kind of.
And you had never worked in a public school before.
I'd never worked in a public school, so it was like an intimidating prospect for me. And so I eventually was like, yeah, I'll at least interview. I'll talk to some people. And one of the people I talked to was Katie, and then Allie, who had also been on this podcast, and then a principal at the elementary school at the time. Did like a screener. I had just over the previous year or so been doing the NME, the Advanced Trainer Neurosequential Model in Education program with Bruce Perry, and had kind of been learning a lot more about like why some of the stuff that I watched worked, or why some of the stuff I was doing that worked, why it was working. I started learning about the brain a lot more and the whys behind it. And so I could start being a lot more intentional about it. That came up during the screener. Katie was immediately bought in because I said Bruce Perry's name, and yada yada yada. Ended up going there to work at that building. Didn't know at the time that Katie would end up being the principal. She was the special ed coordinator at the time. And so that's kind of how I ended up at the place I currently am. So then where I'm at now, working in the behavior mental health unit for our district, and in the elementary school, specifically this year, have 4th and 5th grade students. Work alongside somebody who does 2nd and 3rd grade as well. Same kind of job. And then our building, the model that we aim for, and again, it depends on any kid, right? Any given day, any given year. But the model we kind of aim for is to be able to take students that maybe would have gone to the place that I worked for so many years, and instead we gather them into like our local school, like our school, and we have them go out and they're just in gen ed rooms as much as possible and alongside their typical peers as much as possible. And we're really working hard to be able to put them in a spot where eventually maybe they're either not in a specific program, or that they can increasingly be able to kind of manage the expectations of a school, right, and a school day on their own without somebody like right alongside of them. And we're kind of teaching them those skills, and then also being alongside them through that whole process, along with working obviously then with a bunch of general education teachers who are just about some of the most willing people to allow us to do this that I'm sure are around at this point.
And ultimately they have access to tier 1 instruction with really high quality instructors that know what they're doing. And that's made huge academic improvements and growth because of that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we were just recently doing our mid-year
data meetings. Yeah.
And it's interesting. Actually, Katie and Josh and I were all talking about it not too long ago. And this idea that really I feel like the best thing I can do isn't like something where I pull kids out and I'm teaching them reading in some way that I'm like really good at teaching kids reading that don't know how to read, or like I'm doing something with math that's really special and different that brings them along. But I feel like the best thing I can do is help them be as regulated as possible, if you want to use kind of that buzzword, but help them be in the best spot that they can be, and help them believe that they can be in class in their just typical class. And that can be okay, and that they can ask for help and they can get help, and that they can say what they need and somebody's going to listen to them. And it doesn't mean it's always just whatever they say they get, but it does mean that somebody's listening to them and that they know that they're being listened to, and that we're trying to work out the best scenario for them to get the stuff done they need to get done, to learn what they need to learn, but then also to provide them a space and time if it's not their day, or they're having a rough one, or it's a rough moment, or something unexpected happened and they're struggling with it. That's the best thing I can do. And that's the reason I really believe that's the reason why students in, our class, which I kind of hate talking about overall, but I think that's why students in classes that I have a lot of times make growth that they make. It's not because of something I'm doing with them academically. It's the fact that I'm getting them into the teachers that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that they should be in and are delivering tier 1 instruction. And it turns out if you provide that for kids, like, they're going to make growth. And they're going to make more growth probably than what they would make with me specifically trying to make them make growth somewhere else. And I think that's maybe a key thing for people.
Yes.
In education.
And they're around other peers with the mirror neuron effect. We talked about this. I think every time we talk about a new research article or whatever, that we've shown that when people are around peers and their mirror neurons are firing together, that we've seen regulation and actually growth through students. So getting them around kids who are typically doing the expectations, and that's the vibe of the classroom, all that stuff, then they start syncing up. They start,
yeah. And it ends up being really cool to watch, and it's cool to watch kids that that progress over the course of several years. Now I've been there long enough now where I can have some 5th graders that we saw as 2nd graders coming in, and even for Josh, students that he had potentially before 2nd grade at a different school that now he sees as 5th graders that have made so much progress. And I think that's what's neat now, is watching how everybody does their part any given year, right? Some of those youngest teachers that are teaching the youngest students, they're not necessarily always going to get to see the payoff during the year they have that kid. But if they stay around long enough, right? Like, you end up seeing the payoff when the kid is in 5th grade, when the kid's in 7th grade, when the kid's getting ready to graduate, and they're saying thanks to Mr. or Mrs. whoever back in 1st grade who stuck it out with me when I was doing whatever I was doing, but it takes time, and it takes understanding like what your part is in that bigger story, with those kids and
What
families.
was the hardest part about transitioning into a public school compared to being in a separate facility? Because now gen ed teachers, typical students, different school model.
Yeah, everybody that I worked with when I was in the separate facility was doing the same thing. We were all in the same boat. We all had similar students with similar challenges, and we were all up against similar problems that we were trying to solve and ways to help those students. And so if you were up against something kind of weird or that you didn't expect or that was particularly tough, you could go to, 9 different teachers and get insight or, get really clear understanding, like they really clearly understood what you were going through because they also had gone through it or were going through it. And so going into a public school setting, I was kind of on my own, right? There was another teacher that was doing a similar thing. But there's by and large, I was kind of on my own all of a sudden, and also felt like I was the one that was supposed to be an expert in it, right? So not only am I kind of by myself, but I'm also supposed to know what to do. And I think that was a little bit hard just for me personally. I'm not like the most outgoing person in the world. It takes me a long time. I was just talking to somebody else about this at work yesterday.
Very true.
And I think probably through that first year, I knew the second grade gen ed teacher that was right across like the little alcove from me. And I knew the other teacher that was doing something similar to what I was doing that kind of shared a room with a curtain with me. And then I kind of knew some other people a little bit. But I don't know that I knew many of the 4th or 5th grade teachers at all for over a year and didn't have any kind of close. So it just took me a really long time to actually get to know people and for people to get to know me and therefore buy in at all to anything that I had to maybe say. Not because they were like, I'm closed-minded and don't care about something new, but they're like, I don't know, is this guy crazy? Is he going to stay? I don't know who he is, Yeah. So that took time, and that's also why I don't love moving places. so I'm probably just here forever.
Yeah. Justin does not like change.
I'm not a huge change person.
Slow working on that.
Yeah. Slowly but surely. Okay, that was much longer than I planned on it being. Okay. What about you? You go through your
all
story,
right, I'll be fairly quick, but I had gone to school for general education and reading for early childhood. I really wanted to go to school for interior design or criminal justice, and I ended up in education because I couldn't teach in kindergarten because it's kind of like both, right? Yeah. So that's where I ended up. But I accidentally was placed in a preschool program for my field experience, and the preschool. 2 things changed when I went to that placement. One, it was a special education placement, and everybody in that also was doing field experience, they were all special ed teachers. I was the only gen ed teacher. I remember calling the university and saying, I think I'm not in the right field placement. Am I still going to get credit? And do you want me to change? And they said, we're not going to get you another placement. You just have to hang in there. It's fine. But I was placed in like a structured autism program. And this was 20 years ago when autism was just really starting to get some momentum in terms of educational reform and what we knew about autism. Autism Speaks had just started, so like that whole awareness was really prevalent. So I had never really been around because of our age. We didn't really have a lot of people with disabilities in our classes. They were always in a separate corner of the school or kind of segregated. So never really had a lot of exposure to people with disabilities, and I just fell in love with the kids in that program. I knew instinctually that was really what I wanted to do. And then the second thing that had happened was it was a Reggio-based school, so project-based learning. So knowing that I kind of have a knack for like art and interior design and those kind of things, my brain leans that way. Reggio is very art-based, very expression-based, kids' interests and stuff. So I was super fascinated there, and I've been in a study group for like 20 years for that, with a lot of the same people over and over again. So I knew I wanted to be in a Reggio-based inspired school, and I knew I wanted to work with kids with disabilities. And that's kind of how I ended up in my district I'm in now. I had requested to be put in their kindergarten placement for my student teaching, which is one of our schools still standing, and did a great student teaching experience there and was able to get hired on. Again, it was hard to find a job at that time.
Yeah.
Like when you were a teacher, I was like, I got hired on like the second week before school started. Now we can't find teachers. It was hard to get a teaching job. So I was lucky enough to get a job, and that really changed everything. But what I want to share is that for people that get frustrated or knocked down with this work, I have been told no so many times. So my first year, they cut my position because they were transitioning to 2 K1 schools, and I was not a part of the K1 planning. I did not have a job the next year. It was also kind of weird to be in the building because they were cutting positions and I just didn't have one. I ended up getting a job, like they needed an intervention specialist, and I had gone back and got my master's because I knew I was teaching like a young fives kindergarten program. And so they came and interviewed me to see if I wanted to come over and do that. And I was hired, luckily. I don't think it was like a slam dunk that I was given this job. And so I was ended up going and opening that school. And basically I started the autism program there. My best friend that I met through college, she was teaching had the same background, was teaching an autism program, and had gone through and got a lot of the teach training through North Carolina for structured programs. And so I had put in a request with our district for me to do that. The rigor of instruction was picking up, and we were just like, we had everybody in inclusion, which was really hard for our kids with multiple needs and autism. A lot of behavior was happening because we didn't have structure or supports in place. So I started our first structured program, and then started training Allie Masters, actually, who's been on the podcast. Allie and I had worked together for a long time, and I helped her get her program started at the secondary school. Knew I wanted to go into school administration. I really liked mentoring and doing the leadership components, and interviewed for a coordinator's job, was really a successful teacher, did a lot of project-based learning over the years, and had these like elaborate projects. We put on a movie. My kids have done like a fashion show. We had an art studio. My kids opened a restaurant, like just really over the top, like poured my life into education with these kids, joined their like ABA therapy teams, which ABA therapy was really big at the time. Had gone back and learned sign language to help with communication, and went and got active learning trained for kids with visual impairments and all these things. And I just loved like fostering, and I was like really embedded into the community. I was on the board of directors of some autism groups, and really, really involved. And I just loved that leadership component. Got my leadership degree and interviewed for the coordinator. I thought for sure I was probably gonna get that job, was told no. So they looked at me and said, if you want to be a principal, you can't stay in special education. So my husband and I were going to try to have some our children at the time. So I transitioned over to first grade, taught first grade. And so that was a good perspective because it was typical kids. I had gone back into gen ed and working in a Title I school with some really difficult kids, or kids that weren't identified yet or had behavioral mental health issues. Sure. Really gave me experiences. And then when we had my oldest daughter, we've noticed some behavioral issues with her, with just her dysregulated nervous system. And luckily I had known a little bit about that, but really the heart of why I got into trauma-informed care was traditional discipline was not working with her. And so we did a lot of Ross Green's work at that time. Right after I had her, I interviewed for a principal job at a small school that was opening, was told no. Went back into the classroom, taught again, had my second daughter, interviewed for another school, was told no. So I was feeling really good about myself.
Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah, continued teaching first grade. Again, had a lot of really tough kids, and successfully was able to integrate them in the classroom. Kind of fascinated. I knew I was doing things. And the way my leadership style was that everybody was an equal player. Like it was equal components. I had a pair. I co-taught, like equal 50-50 co-taught with this really brilliant teacher. And I've had really good co-teaching partners at that time. Luckily, COVID had hit. I had somebody retire. I don't know if I just got lucky because it was like Zoom interviews. And they were like, I don't know, it's COVID. Nobody wants to go to education right now. It's terrible. We'll give her the job. So I hustled that year. I really worked hard that year. I was a coordinator. I had a love for special education, got to connect and see a lot of school environments and how things were operating, things that were working well, things that weren't working well, things principals needed. I felt like I could really help and support intervention specialists because I had a pretty diverse background now with behavioral mental health and the low incident population, which are really the populations that school districts struggle with the most. They just aren't sure what to do with the kids. And got lucky because I remember interviewing Justin as the coordinator. I wanted to reform that behavioral mental health program and make it different. And as soon as Justin said, well, I was trained, we saw advanced neurosequential model trainer, I was like, this is going to be our guy. And I am, so I think it's just kind of interesting how it all worked out and how again and again. So knowing that I didn't know the principal at the time was going to leave, that was kind of like a last minute surprise decision, and thought, well, I'll just interview again. What's the worst they're going to tell me now? I've already heard it a bunch. And I was luckily enough, that worked out, and I was ended up being the principal, and then we started here. So knowing I wanted to come in to a school, I had gotten really into a lot of the research, and we've done podcast on our professional development, but getting my applied educational neuroscience certificate and Ross Green's advanced collaborative problem solving training, and I just knew I wanted a trauma-informed school. Lots of errors that I made coming in, and I think we'll talk about that when we talk about some leadership styles. But I really know philosophically, I had surrounded myself with really good people there, and the staff was kind of ready, and I'm really, really proud of the work that we do at our school every day, and with lots of mistakes, lots of errors, but it's been really cool to see a lot of kids accepted in the sense of belonging. I think the reason why I keep doing it, I think we both do, is I love helping kids that nobody wants to help.
Yeah.
That people just said, I don't know, too big of a problem, I don't want to deal with it. I love seeing kids succeed when nobody else thinks they can, and then proving everybody wrong this kid can't do it. This is probably the type 3 in me, but I love that. That is I am so proud of our kids and the fact that people give them a second chance and don't give up hope for them.
Yeah, and there's somebody that I'd worked with before that talked so much about timing of stuff and how timing plays such a part. And I think back because I'd interviewed in the district we're in before a couple different times for different kinds of roles, and had positions offered to me, and then also had positions not offered to me.
Yeah.
At different points after I stopped being the dean of students. I had kind of interviewed a couple different times, and just didn't feel like it was time to go. Right. It didn't feel like it was time to like go somewhere else, or that I should do it. And there was no reason why that I could really identify. That's how it was. Or one of the positions that I didn't get offered, that I thought I might, and was really struggling, which is a thing I'll do, but I was really struggling with like, what do I do if this gets offered to me? And like, nobody had even offered it to me yet. And then they didn't, so it wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Lesson learned. I should not worry about it too much until somebody offers it to me. But if I don't, then I wait 6 weeks, Katie. And I don't know if people will wait 6 weeks. So.
Probably not. Yeah.
But same idea with you, right? Like, had you gotten some of those jobs, you would have gotten.
I think, thank goodness, every time. I don't think it was the right time and opportunity. The right people weren't surrounded with me. I mean, I've grown. I can't imagine doing what we're doing without the people that we're doing it with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's always kind of a big deal. All right. Somewhat quickly, right? Knowing both of our stories, why has the podcast been a passion project of ours? Like, why are we doing it? We're not getting rich by doing it.
No,
that's not the
time.
reason. Yeah.
I would just say that I think it becomes worth the time because I think we both have a heart for service and helping. All three of us do, and see such a need, or we see such the holes and gaps with kids not being successful in their current educational placement. And I think we have something. I think we believe we've seen our proof of product of like why we've been able to help and make kids successful. Not always perfect. A lot of, right? It never is. It's always intervention, adjusting, planning. But I love that families continue to come back to us time and time again and saying, only time I ever felt good about school. I felt like I could leave and go to work because my kid was doing really well.
I didn't worry every time the phone buzzed.
Yes.
During the day.
My kids said this is the best school year this is the best school years they've ever had. And I just feel like I want to duplicate that for them through their whole educational career, and how can we continue to support them? So this is our small effort in terms of putting professional development and our stories out there, or at least getting conversations started of maybe we need to start looking at some things differently in schools.
Yeah. I just think we've had different experiences, but that are pretty unique overall. And we bring, whether that's like our educational experiences, whether that's our professional experiences, where we've kind of been. And I think that I think that there is something that we have to say that hopefully is helpful and maybe normalizes some of the tough parts of what we do, because there's plenty of tough parts of what we do. And hopefully it kind of normalizes that for people, and also helps people know that they're not out there just alone, that they have people that exist, even if it's just two voices on a podcast, that are doing similar style work, and that are recognizing that it's not just perfect ever, but that it's part of a journey and part of trying to figure all that out. Like I said before, I really just want to help people, and I really want to help kids, and I really love being able to work with the adults. I think I find maybe even more so than I like working with the kids at times. And I really, really like working with the kids and watching them grow. But it's really fun for me to be able to watch, to be able to come alongside of adults in different, whether that's pairs, whether it's teachers, whether it's, intervention specialists, like you name it. I really enjoy that, and being able to come alongside them in a way that hopefully, again, helps them feel supported, and gives them the opportunity to grow, and me an opportunity to grow in different ways. So
yeah, and I would say both of us have logged thousands of hours working with dysregulated kids, different disabilities at times, but we have. It's very rare to see people sustain work and working with chronically dysregulated kids all the time.
Yeah,
most people have a time frame, and they
kinda
clock out and move on.
Yeah.
And we seem to keep on going back into that. So.
Yeah, and I think that does make a difference. All right, so daily basis. You want to give people a snapshot of like what this looks like now?
Yeah, I would say
the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I would say probably a little bit. I don't want to talk but my leadership style is really we're just like a team. So we work together. I mean, obviously I'm the principal and Justin's intervention specialist there, but we really collaborate and work together in providing professional development and research, and supporting staff, and really make sure that people feel empowered to work with kids in our building. Our whole team really just works together. It is incredible. We just help and take each other's kids all the time, or support, or whatever the needs are there, and really think of ourselves really as facilitators for learning. But really, it's a traditional role. I mean, I'm Justin's principal. That does not change. And even though we do things outside of school, and luckily everybody makes my job really easy, so it never seems to be a problem. But I do at school, I lean on Justin a lot for a sounding board, and Justin just keeps on asking me questions back and never gives me the answer, which I appreciate. He tries to get me to think.
It's just because I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
so I'm like, I don't know. Somebody's got to figure it out, but it's not going to be me.
Yeah, so that's the really hard part. You need to find somebody that's a good sounding board that keeps on challenging, asking you questions back, and helping you just to listen, and never really says anything, just listens and asks me really great questions back. And then I just instantly feel better that I've had a space to do that. So that's been really helpful. And then I probably would not have stayed doing this if he wasn't there to do that with me.
Do I get paid extra by you somehow for that?
No, you just get gratitude of my friendship.
Well, all right, I guess that works. I say frequently that that I don't know if the program would actually, I know I'm almost 100% confident that the program specifically that I'm working in wouldn't be what it is, and wouldn't have had some of the success or effectiveness, and certainly some of the freedom that we've had if you weren't the principal there. And I think that hopefully if you're out there and you're an administrator, like, understand that the power you have with that, because you have the power to, because listen, tough stuff comes up, and without getting into too much, I mean, there are times where it's a lot for me working in that program. It is certainly a lot for other teachers who are just trying to go about their regular day of being a fourth grade teacher or a fifth grade teacher or a second grade teacher. And yet they're also at a school that has a behavior mental health program within it. That's a lot. And whether it's trainings, or whether it's support, or whether it's, sticking to what we've decided is best for students, or whatever it might be, I don't know that it would have had the effectiveness, or would have lasted the way it has, without an administrator that was supportive and in it and committed to it, like Katie has been. I think that, so thank you for that, first of all. And I think also, for me on like a daily basis, my job is coming in and really just trying to read people so much, whether it's reading the pairs that work with me, whether it's reading myself, maybe more than anybody else, whether it's reading the students and reading the, the other adults in the building, like what are what is going to be capable any given day? What is everyone going to be capable of on any given day? And that's kind of what I do. That's like my morning every day, is trying to figure that out and see what that is, and relying a lot on the two pairs I work with, who are amazing, and relying a lot on all the gen ed teachers I work with to kind of be honest about that as we've gotten to know each other about what we're capable of and what expectations are going to be and things like that. Because any given day doesn't look like any given other day, and we have to be okay with that overall. And so it's a lot of trying to figure out what that is and what that means every day.
Yeah.
And that's really so much of my job. And then I do, like typical intervention specialists, like paperwork or like other things like that I normally do, or I'm working with a kid on, and they're reading and they're writing. And
I would say one unique thing that you're probably not gonna give yourself credit for is that when kids are really dysregulated and people aren't sure what to do, Justin's the person they call into, and you do a really good job coaching and modeling, especially new teachers that have entered in or maybe don't have a background in working with some of those type of kids. So it's been, I think everybody who has worked with Justin would say, well, I've learned just from watching Justin do things, and you'll say, well, I don't really do anything special, but you do. There's an art and a way that you do it, and so we've survived and not had to send kids to like a county level program, because I think you've been really good about coming and intervening and not letting things get too big, and really supporting and empowering other people to have the competency to do it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I think that I try to be that. I think one of the things Melissa and I figured up one time, we were, I forget what book I was reading. I think it was it doesn't matter. But I was reading this one book, and it was talking about that idea that, 10,000 hours makes you an expert in whatever you do. And I was like, I wonder how many hours I've been with like dysregulated like students, like not just like a student who could get dysregulated or a student, in my classroom, but like they were actively like, it was kind of rough. Yeah, it was rough right now. And I kind of started doing the math, and I was like, man, it's not a stretch to say it's been over 10,000 hours. And I was like, it's kind of a weird way to have spent my life. Like, it's what a weird way to have spent like a huge portion of my life. People
aren't generally happy.
And so there we are. Well, what do you want people to walk away knowing from this episode? It's kind of a different episode. What do you want people to walk away knowing?
I think what I have found over the years, it's, I think sometimes we put a lot of bank on hiring people with experience, or someone that you're looking for very specific profiles when you go to hire. I would say what I have learned, because I have had the most amazing, whether it was co-teaching partners or paraprofessionals I've learned a ton about, or as a principal hiring in people, if you really look for hiring people and train the other things, I could care less about how much experience somebody has, that always plays well for certain things. But at the end of the day, if they don't have the grit, the stamina, the work ethic, the heart, their why isn't there for doing this, it just will never play out well. And I want somebody on my team that I'm going to grow and learn from, that somebody's continually learner, and that at the end of the day is going to be there to support all kids and is on the team. So I feel like that's my biggest walk away from all my years, is that the people you surround yourself will make or break your success.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. I'll echo a similar thing too. Like, we're two people that didn't get plenty of jobs, right? Yeah. Not even within the world of education for me. I was like, I always laugh. The one that makes me, there are a couple that always stand out, but one that makes me laugh, I applied for a box company. They made boxes. It was just cardboard boxes.
They said no. You can't.
I got no call back. They were like, I was like, are you like, what am I? I've got like a college degree. Like, how am I not? What are we doing? And so like you can, there are plenty of people out there who are, like Katie said, like hopefully like good people. If you have any power to hire people, if you have any say in that,
stop looking for the shiny resume.
Yeah.
Look for the heart. It's not about
that. Like look for hiring like the person. And cause like you said, Katie, like you can teach somebody how to do like the skills of the job.
Yeah.
And like what those demands are, you can teach somebody that, but if you bring somebody in that has all of that, but they're not like the right kind of person, then you're kind of in a bad spot. So pay attention. If you have any power at all in hiring, any say at all in hiring, man, look for like the right kind of people. Look for like good people who are in it for all the right reasons, and believe that they're going to work hard to become the person at the job that they need to be. And then I think the other thing is hopefully just hearing some of our story think back, take time today as this episode ends, to sit and think about your own story. Write it out. Maybe you're a person that likes to write. Maybe you're a person that just likes to talk about it with somebody. Go out and grab
Throw
coffee
it on
with somebody.
TikTok.
Yeah. Yes. That's still allowed now.
I don't know.
I don't keep up with stuff enough. Do a craft about it.
Yeah.
Craft your story.
Well, I will say in all seriousness, there's something Dr. Lori has on the Revelations in Education website. If you're interested in doing this with your staff, she has a nest activity where you start building your nest, which is kind of like your origin story. So if you want to get into the crafty part, go see Revelations Education. Yeah.
I'd hate that part, but I would write it down or talk to somebody about it. But whatever it is, think back about why you're doing this, because we're in a profession that is really driven by like, why are we doing it? Mm-hmm. And knowing that and remembering that. And it's about people, and it's about the people you interact with, whether it's the students or the families or your colleagues. But go back and remember that, because especially if you've been at this for a while, it is easy to get into the spot where it just becomes about the skills and not about you as a person and why you decided to do it. So remember why you did it. Remember why you got into this in the first place, and maybe be willing to lean heavy into that at whatever point in your career you're in, instead of getting too hung up on all of the tasks that people are telling you to do and that you're getting bogged down on, and the skills that you're trying to accomplish because you feel like it's the right thing to do to be good at your job. Remember to be the person that you wanted to be when you started out. And so think back on that. Take the time to do that today. As always, it was a longer episode than I thought it would be. As always, remember...
Josh loves that.
Josh loves it. Our schedules love it too.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you guys joining us and hearing a little bit more about our stories. Hopefully that helps you know us a little bit better. I don't know why we waited to episode whatever this is to get to talk about this a little bit more, but hopefully it helps you know us a little bit better and where we've come from. Share your story with somebody else. Share this story with somebody else, and talk about it. Again, we love when you guys reach out to us and give us ratings. We would love to, whether it's on Facebook or presumably Instagram. I don't know the stuff that we have for social media. Still one of the things we need to get better at.
Yeah.
But we would love to hear some of your story and where you came from, and to be able to share some of that as well. And as always, let's go out there and do the work.
Let's go do it.